Well, a very good evening and welcome to Farage on GB News this evening. But maybe it's not a good evening, frankly. Maybe it's not a good day at all. Because tragically, yesterday, another teenager in London is dead. Stabbed. Murdered. Left home, going to school, parents waving her goodbye, expecting to see her in the evening. She didn't even make it to school. I'm sick of it. I suspect you're sick of it. The country's sick of it. We can't just keep going on like this. It's not good enough for a minister there just to say, we've got to change and we've got to have words and we'll have tougher sentences. What about this, though? What about sentencing actually just for carrying a knife? Not just for using one, but actually for carrying it. It's time to do something different. If you always do what you always did, guess what? You'll always get what you always got. And that's why my question to you, watching and listening at home, should people be jailed just for carrying a knife? And then also a second question, if so, for how long? Email me, farage@gbnews.com, or tweet the hashtag Farage on GB News. Well, I'm delighted to have two fantastic guests to debate this in the studio. Norman Brennan, well known to the channel, retired Met Police officer and director of Law and Order Foundation, and also Ken Hines, former chair of Haringey's independent stop and search monitoring group. These are two great guests who know this subject as well as anybody. I'm going to turn first to Ken. Thank you for being with us. Look, you know this subject well, Ken. We can't keep going on like this. We've got to do something different. Surely we've got to think, OK, sentencing, it's not working. Stop and search at the current levels, it's not working. We've got to do something radically different, Ken, if we're going to get radically different results. We've got 13 teenagers this year alone, Ken, dead.
Yeah, I would just like to say, give my condolence to the young girl's family and the community and that's been affected by what took place. And yes, you're saying is right, because the things that we're doing hasn't been working. We're mentioning, yes, in the combination, you may get a better result. But what I find does work better is, first of all, we've got to bring the schools in, because these youngsters are spending a lot of time in schools. And so they've got the most kind of influence on these youngsters. And I want to know, what are they doing about growing their emotional resilience or building their intelligence? My thing is just simply this. If we don't do a triage of different things coming in, where we've got mentors, but I won't call them mentors because that's got a stigma to some youngsters. I call them aunties and uncle, an extended family, people that can work with these young people and win their trust and get their confidence so that we can get in there early.
I mean, you've got a lot of experience with this. You've negotiated with gangs, you've worked with the police, you've won awards on this, which is all fantastic and clearly part of the whole process. But it's not enough on its own, is it, Ken?
Not at all.
And we've got to get tougher.
And let me say this much here. I'm sorry to say, I'm more triggered by what takes place because, again, it's a black young girl and another black man, that's a youngster that's involved. So, both as victim and perpetrators, I would like to see people in my community showing their rage and their anger and disappointment when people in my village do this to another youngster. We need to step up. We need them out there. We need them showing the disapproval in public, the same way that they do with the police. We need to have more people coming out and doing it.
But anybody, in my view, who carries a knife, frankly, we've got to say, if you carry a knife, you're caught carrying a knife, Norman, that's it. You're off the streets, you're taken away, and you could be away for quite some time. We can debate the length of sentences. You and I have spoken on this before. Where are you now on this issue?
I agree. Just to clear up a point, I'm here representing Protect the Protectors, which is a voice for the whole police service, not the Met. But what I will say is this, is that 20 years ago, as a serving police officer, after I was stabbed myself and I saw so many stabbings around, I went up to number 10 and I handed a letter in to Tony Blair, and I said that we need to crack down on knife crime. And I said what we need to do is have mass stop and search. I know it's unpopular between certain communities, but it was important, it was effective. It wasn't the only tool in the book. And the most important thing there was that we needed to send out a very strong message to anyone that walked on the public highway with a knife without lawful authority or reasonable excuse. And if you were found with that knife, it would be a minimum of 5 years imprisonment. And in the 20 years since I handed that letter in and have campaigned tirelessly, nothing whatsoever. Rich Holden just said there that there were more police officers. We do not have any more police officers and no sentencing.
I'm sick of this sort of waffle from ministers. I really am. I want action. I mean, just look at this graphic on the screen. For those of you who are listening, this is showing from about 2011 and 12. This is knife offences that have increased. They've almost doubled over about a 6-year period until 2020, when obviously we had COVID. And I think that coincides with a reduction, Ken, in stop and search. I know it's a very controversial issue, but is there a link between the increase in knife offences and the reduction in stop and search until I think about 2018-19?
I'll tell you what, there's a link. There's a link between how the police carry out their function around stop and search and the lack of trust and confidence that we find in the black community. Now, just remember, even if we are disproportionately stopped and searched, we are probably disproportionately represented as both victims and perpetrators of knife crime.
And that's the biggest tragedy.
And my thing is that they've got to find a way of reaching out to that community to get the intel, because people would be associated by those who's carrying knives to give up the intel. You're not going to get that when you are using force, excessive force, on innocent people going about their normal duties, because you can't tell between a good guy and a bad guy. All you see is a black boy, right? And so therefore, that's to step up and to put handcuffs and to disrespect them.
You've been saying this for years, and you've got experience of it, but it's not sorting it. I mean, I'm looking at what should we do? Should we have a sort of similar policy to the sort of broken windows policy in New York in the early 90s, where actually you've got to, right at the grassroots, you've got to make it clear to everybody, of whatever skin colour, if you carry a knife, right, unless, frankly, you're a chef, then we'll have treble, quadruple stop and search for a year. You get caught carrying a knife, you're off the streets, you're gone.
Let me say this much. The current level of stop and search, and this has been for the last 10, 15 years, has shown less than 3% actually around weapons, and particularly around knives. So they've got a low return on a hit rate, on a positive hit rate around getting knives. And my thing is simply this: if they could justify intelligent-led stop and search, which would give us a better result that the public can see and get the public a better result, I'd be all in favour. But right now, they've got the Met Police are in crisis, and my thing is there's a lack of confidence not only in the black community but all communities.
Yeah, but Ken, of course, it's not actually just the Met Police. Unbelievably, we all think it's really bad in London, but actually the statistics are much, much worse in the West Midlands.
In what regard?
With regard to knife crime, knife offences per 100,000 of the population, I think it's about 20% worse in the West Midlands, knife offences, than here in London. So it's not just the Met Police, it's other forces.
And therefore, maybe in London they concentrate on the disproportionality with black youngsters that may carry in knives. But in the Midlands, that can't be the case. In the Midlands, then you'll find it's a different thing altogether.
Norman, you'd have mandatory sentences for just carrying a knife. It'll be interesting after the break just what the audience think, and if so, how long.
Can I have a say, please,
Go
Richard?
for it.
Right. Let me just correct some narratives. Since 2009, there were 1.5 million stop and searches. Because of the outrage by certain sections of the community, normally black sections of the community, that reduced last year to 500,000. Knife crime, gun crime has gone through the absolute roof. Do you know... Let me just correct a narrative, and it's about time someone from within policing told Britain the truth. Black people are not stopped because of the colour of their skin. They are stopped because police follow the statistics. The statistics state that in London, some 70% of all murders are normally committed by young black men on other black men. So the reason why police stop and search so many black suspects is because 70% are responsible, either the victim or the offender, for those crimes. So who does the black community expect us to stop? It's not a point of we'll go 50-50 with a white community. We follow the statistics, and it's about time the black community took some responsibility for the appalling behaviour of some in their community, rather than blame the police and frustrate us because the families that have had somebody murdered plead with us to do something about it. When we do, and it's the communities as well that want us to do something about, other sections of the community frustrate us by accusing us of doing something that we're not doing.
How long would you have as a mandatory sentence, Norman? For
5 years
5
minimum.
years.
And if that happened, I promise you this, knife crime, which I've been a leading campaigner on for 35 years, having nearly been murdered myself on duty, stabbed in the chest by an armed burglar, I promise you it would be reduced by possibly up to 75%. A strong message has to be sent out. It's never been sent out. And these ministers that promise you we've got more police, we haven't got more police. We need more police.
I'm with you. I think you've got to do something different. Otherwise, we just get always the same waffle and the same desperate results. Come on, Ken.
But what Norman's
let's try something different.
No, listen. What Norman's saying about the crime
sentences, and if so,
I'm in favour of that. But what I've got to put it straight is very few black youngsters are involved for carrying knives. So why are you stopping? You can't have a fishing expedition on stopping the greater goods and not getting any results because you're shooting yourself in the foot when you do that, because
you've got to do it all.
But let me say about this.
Ken, I've been a policeman. I've been a policeman for 31 years. 70% of all robberies on the street, when I was a serving robbery squad officer, were young black men. You've got to take responsibility. You can't keep blaming the police for some of the issues that the black community has.
It's only a small proportion of black people, black youngsters are involved in it.
People are still dying. We've got to do something different. That's my question, folks. It's got a bit warm and heated in here because this is such a desperately important and emotional issue. What do you think?